Sejal is a writer and an editor, and she's been part of the writing and editing landscape for about 17 years now. She's also the founder of Marine Life of Mumbai and writes a lot on science and environmental issues. So she's going to be giving us an initial presentation on why and how Marine Life of Mumbai was started and the community interaction that they undertake. After that, we have Abhishek, who is a marine biologist and a keen diver, and extremely active as an environmentalist and as an activist in terms of environmental issues. He is one of my really good friends whom I keep approaching for fish IDs or critter IDs whenever I need. And that's the introduction for them. And over to Sejal for the first part of the presentation.
Thank you, Vish. I'm just going to try and share my screen. Let's see if that works. Can you guys see this? Okay, no.
Again, Sejal.
I'll try again. Okay, here we go. Abhishek, I can't seem to share. It says I'm not allowed.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. Okay. Is this visible? Is that okay?
Yes, it is. Perfect.
And I'm also audible. Okay. So thank you, Vish. To everybody else on this call, a very warm welcome to the shores of Bombay. Through the course of this session, we're going to try and take you close to some of the shore creatures, of course, but we're also going to talk a little bit about how a place like Mumbai, like an unlikely place like Mumbai, which is busy, polluted, crowded, frantic pace of life, has actually come to now host a very strong and growing community of tide poolers, and which has kind of taught us how to engage with different types of communities and how to probably not continue to live in bubbles and be more inclusive, because wildlife is really found in the most unlikely places. Like, for example, this. This then is a part of Mumbai's intertidal zone. This little shared space between land and sea is where Marine Life of Mumbai does most of its work. What is that work? Well, it's pretty simple and straightforward. It's divided in two. There are two pillars. One is outreach, which is literally telling people what's on the shore, science communication. And the other part is data collection and documentation of what we find. And what is vital about that bit is that it's open access. All of it is open for all of you and anyone else who wants to use it, to understand it, to incorporate into their research. And why is that vital? Well, I don't know, some of you might actually relate with this, but before I joined Marine Life of Mumbai, marine life to me was whales and sharks and underwater reefs, and it was definitely not a walk on the beach. And a walk on the beach was definitely not a wildlife safari to me. And it really absolutely is. And Abhishek Jamalabad will tell you how in just a few minutes. But it's a legit wild space. And it's not a protected area, right? We don't think of it as a wild space because it's not a national park, it's not a wildlife sanctuary, it's not protected under law, but wildlife lives there. And boss, they exist in the way that we exist, which is very special. So if you look at this, for example, this photo, which is one of my favorite pictures from the Intertidal, there's a spiral melongena seashell, sea snail egg case right in the front. There's a crow that's waiting for its dinner on the left. There's a fisher boat in the distance. And beyond that is like a man-made structure. And this is just in this little patch of the Intertidal. Now imagine an entire coastline. And there are so many things that are living under these rocks that we haven't even seen yet. So imagine how much there is to still see and document. So over the last 3 years, what Marine Life of Mumbai and the team and the community have tried to do is, in this city of like towering skyscrapers, we have tried to fit our mindset into the scale of a miniature world, which is a tide pool. And that, for example, the next to the octo, who's by the way chilling in a really busy intersection of Bombay, that's Worli. And to realize and to get people to realize that all of these things are homes. So for example, in that particular tide pool or on a sandy shore, you'll see things like this. That's a clam. This is at Juhu, by the way. And it's using its foot to sort of move around and feel its way. I think it might be camera shy as well. Or you might actually come across hermits in a tide pool, which is so essentially Bombay. And this is something that some of you might have heard on the last talk that I did. How these little underwater forests are like little cities in themselves. And that's what we're trying to kind of, get people to see, look, they're going to have a little moment in terms of space crunch. There you go. There you go. So this is, in that sense, we've actually tried to think about things that happen to creatures in a shared space like this. So for example, you'd see this, and when I say miniature world of the tide pool life, this is what I mean. So when you see something like this, I saw this at Juhu, and while it might look like a thali full of those temple flowers that they give, actually, when you look closer, this is what it is. It's an animal that's literally brimming with life. This is an egg case of a sea snail, Indothias sea snail. And you see the small little yet to be born babies moving around. That is what each of our shows is full of. And you'll see so much more when Abhishek shows you a little bit more of our shows. And this, for example, is again at Juhu, one of our most crowded beaches. And we've all seen Juhu Chowpatty in so many, in pop culture references, in our trips to Bombay. This sea fan is right at Juhu. And I'm going to show you, of course, like I said, that look closer to the miniature world. I'm going to show you a video that does two things. One, it will show you that when I talked about how you need to move beyond the first glance and see smaller things, you will see smaller things on this. Like you'll see those little white things are actually skeleton shrimps that this sea fan itself is being ecosystem to. But more than that, I would like you to hear the audio of this clip, because this is my segue into telling you how Marine Life of Mumbai is slightly, I think we might be more effective in our communication and our science communication, because the team is super excited, very excitable team, in love with the shore. And I think that shows. So I'm going to just show you this for these two reasons. So just look at this, okay? We've seen the skeleton shrimps. We are very excited. Omkar, one of our team members, has completely lost all control. Just listen to him.
Sejal, we won't be able to hear the audio from the video.
That's unless, the skeleton shrimp. So the reason I have made you listen to that is to actually feel how incredibly in love and excited this team is about sharing this information with the outside world. And by outside world, I mean technically non-wildlife folks. So when your enthusiasm and the community that you're trying to build has this sort of love for what it's looking at every time that we go on a shore, your communication is damn solid, and it's going to be magical because you are delighted and you can't wait to show people what you've seen. And that has actually formed the crux of Marine Life of Mumbai's science communication, of our community building. I think it's just a group of people who got together, whose singular purpose was they saw a city in a new light, they saw what was hiding in plain sight, and they said, boss, we have to tell every single person about this. And somewhere that is what we started to do. Like we started to bring people to the shore, we started to do communication online, we started to talk to people we started sharing photos. And in that way, more and more people came to us. We started having scientists over to talk to people about, bring scientists within questioning distance, where they can ask all sort of questions to, to answer their doubts about what's happening on the shore, in the oceans, basically to get people to understand their cities better. and their oceans better, because they're actually quite connected. They're not different. Like the health, and I've said this last time as well, that the health of a city, health of the shore, health of a ocean, of the ocean next to it, it's all connected. So we started getting more people to the shore, and in this way, what happened is a community started to build. And here's where I want to, I have a sort of a question about when we say the like-mindedness of a community, right? We always say when we build a community, it's supposed to be like-minded. Correct? That's usually what we say. And I think while that is true at the core, I think we need to look at like-mindedness a little more closely. Because when this group of people came together for Marine Life of Mumbai, it was a big team at that point. Let me tell you, it was not like-minded. None of these people were actually except for the unifying factor of loving the shore. Different attitudes, different professions, different people, different experiences, different skill sets, and different visions of what they wanted from Marine Life of Mumbai and their own lives. And believe me, that has been the strength of this team. That has been the strength of even our growing community, because sameness, authoritarian views, majoritarian views, we all know what's going on with that, right? We know how to, we're living with that. But differences in terms of experiences, what you bring to the table. So there were writers, there are photographers, marine biologists, illustrators, business people, students, sports instructor. Pradeep Patade was a sports instructor himself. And all of these people came together with these specific skill sets and kind of unleashed themselves on the show and on communication. So we would ask each other, and that's what made it so unique, right? Because when you have such a diverse group of people together, not afraid to ask questions, because everybody was sort of starting out, we're not scientists. And even the scientists in the team, and Abhishek will probably tell you more about that as well, came to tide pooling a bit, they didn't study it. So they were learning with us. The whole group learned together, and the whole group learned how to communicate that outside. And you had to be right, you had to be factually correct, but you also had to be like delighted, which came very easily to all of us. But in that sense, what we were able to do with this really different group of people is we were able to fire from all cylinders. So the artists started art workshops about intertidal life. We actually put together 2 intertidal festivals over 2 years, and got like really diverse group of people to attend, not just wildlife folks, but non-wildlife as well. I'm a journalist, so I started writing, in newspapers and magazines about the intertidal life. There were tech people who kind of made the back end really strong. All our communication was different because we were all different. And that kind of goes against what we've heard about like-mindedness, people on the same page. I actually think for MLOM that didn't work. In fact, what worked is that we were all so very different. And even our extended community. So because our team was different, our communication was diverse. And because our communication was diverse, our community was diverse. We had all sorts of people come. We still have all sorts of people come. The youngest person on our walks has been 8 years old. The oldest has been 60 something. So if you ask different people from our audience that what do you think MLOM does? Somebody will say, "Arey shore walk karte hain." Somebody will say science communication karte hain. Somebody will say, "Arey I just come to their Insta for photos. Yeah, they have the best photos." So it's a very it's a mix of people who engage with what they want to engage, but doing that they come for the photos and stay for the science. So they come for something and they stay for everything else that is also there. And that I think has been in terms of community building, and there's something that there's so much we talk about that, because as people who communicate about wildlife, who do outreach about wildlife, who do research about wildlife, we want as many people to come and kind of gather in our delight and knowledge as possible, right? And that is what I think we were able to do with this kind of train of thought. Like there was different team, different communication, diverse audiences. And in that sense, everybody sort of came together, and we thought at the end of the day, you think, okay, fine. So your communication was diverse. You built a community, fab, whatever. You'll go on the shore and you'll see lots of things. But what's next? And to that, I think what has been wonderful, I think for the last 3 years now, is that one of our team members, Shaunak Moti, he made this project on a website called iNaturalist, which Abhishek will tell you about, and you should all get on, and he'll tell you why, in terms of documentation and beautiful science data, open access again. All our observations from Bombay went up on this website, and they were verified by international global experts. And what happened is, as a community building exercise, we started sharing and there was information given to each other. But this open access data traveled to court through wildlife activist organization, because they were able to use it because it's open access, right? And this went to court against the coastal road, showing the kind of biodiversity that is there, corals that are Schedule 1. All of those things was possible because a community came together and started to record information that otherwise might not have been in public domain. And that I thought was pretty special, because it literally brought people on the streets. And imagine somebody, even for coastwise, we had like thousands and thousands of people, and on this kind of protest, and for what? For a little stretch of land which ocean ends between ocean and land, that is like the intertidal zone, the no man's land, as I like to call it. So that also was quite special. I think another thing that happens through that is, this is just some of the places we've been carrying in, and this is not like a flex. I'm not trying to, it's not a plug. What I'm trying to say is that when everybody becomes ambassadors, when a community is built, people become ambassadors. So everybody who comes on our walk becomes an ambassador. Everybody who comes and writes about us becomes an ambassador of the shore. So what happens by this? It's very simple. The line between wildlife and non-wildlife, science and non-science, that sort of keeps blurring until it drops away. And basically that is what Marine Life of Mumbai, from day one, I think that was the objective, that sabko lana hai. And that is good for any sort of community building exercise. Everybody needs to come. It may, that like-mindedness thing needs to sort of be looked at a little differently, because that is the success of it. For this team, I think the last 3 years, documentation, collection of data, learning the graph, being accurate, being very, very driven in terms of our communication has been excellent. We have become very familiar to the shore. As you can see, some of us more familiar than the others. Totally comfortable in an environment that is actually not ours. And sometimes too comfortable. And we were also taught some lessons, as you can see. When the tide turns, when we don't want to leave, it'll make sure that we do. There you go. That's the tide's way of telling us that your time's up and you need to leave. Also giving a lot more love and importance to those little windows that we had in favorable low tides to go and document not just document, but just meet and greet all the citizens, other citizens of Bombay. On all our walks on the shore, we've actually met lots of people who have just come to the shore for pretty much to chill. Like this father-daughter pair who had just come to, actually they tide pooled in a very different manner than us, but they did. They looked into tide pools, they saw crabs, she ran away, she came back. And apart from all the things I've said, that yes, it's a wild space, yes, it is important for the coast, it is important for our own health to have a great coast, all of those things one side. But also, I think the intertidal zone itself is a gift. I think it's your buffer between land and sea. And in a place like Bombay, it allows you some pause. It allows you some space. It allows you to introspect. It allows you to escape. And it also allows a place that is breathtakingly beautiful, and to listen to the sound of waves. So apart from all the important ecosystem benefits that we get, we also get this one benefit. And I think we don't talk about that enough. And that is also what a community does, right? It kind of builds because there's this mutual love. And ultimately, this space in Bombay and other coastal cities and other coastal places, I'm sure, I think have so much going for it. Like this photo, there's a dog here, there's a man here, and God knows how many creatures in this. And those how many creatures is what I think Abhishek Jamalabad will now sort of take you on a show journey and meet and greet everything that's here. And basically, this is what community building, and this has actually allowed us to even move ahead and build larger communities in terms of Coastal Conservation Foundation, which is now a registered organization, which has allowed us to go beyond Bombay. And MLOM becomes a project that we continue to work with in the city and have more stuff like that and kind of knowledge share across the country, not just in the city. That's it. That's me.
Hey Sejal, just hang on. We need to watch the video of the skeleton shrimp again.
Okay, 1 second.
And we need you to unplug your microphone so that and play the audio through your laptop so that it comes out
Sorry,
to
I'm
us.
so sorry. That was such a 1 second. Huh?
Oh no, don't be sorry about it. Even I didn't realize it till the time people started mentioning it.
Is this better?
You'll have to unplug your microphone.
Yeah, I have. Can you all hear this?
Yes.
That's the enthusiastic team.
Oh, look at that. Out of paper. Crazy.
It's gorgeous.
Shit. I'm gonna really enjoy listening to this later. Yeah, oh shit. Look at that tongue, yeah. Okay, I'm taking it, okay? Done.
That was what it was. Was that better?
Perfect.
Yes. So yeah, that was what it was.
Thank you, Sejal. And now over to our own doc crickets, Abhishek.
Sorry, am I audible now?
Yeah, ready when you are.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So, Sejal basically introduced you to the whole mood of MLOM. And what I'm going to do now is show you some of the creatures and the biological side of MLOM. So this phrase "mysteries of the deep" has become like a catchphrase for marine biology. With like the deep sea exploration has just started to take off in the past couple of decades or so, and there's some fascinating deep sea life being uncovered. So there's this whole obsession that's happened with the deep sea as the last frontier of biology, last frontier of wildlife, kind of. But what I want to tell you, and what MLOM tries to convey, is that all of these mysteries of the deep start right at your doorstep. This is a picture of an octopus that was taken on the busy seashores of Mumbai. So what I'm going to do is take you through a sort of a virtual walk. And all of us have been, those of us who regularly go to the seashore, we've been missing it a lot, and COVID is still blocking our access to it. So I think, to myself and to the few tide poolers who I see in the participant list, this is a bit of a trigger warning, sort of. Okay, so I'll start by just saying there are two kinds of two kinds of seashores that are across Mumbai's western seaboard. One is this kind of place, a rocky seashore, as you can see. Rocky seashores have rock platforms, that's one kind, extensive platforms of rock which hold tide pools. And the other kind, much more common in Mumbai, is cobble fields like this, where you find loose rocks under which creatures hide. These are the shores we visit most often because it's easy to find creatures in tide pools and under rocks. But we also have sandy seashores, like Juhu Beach in this case. Sandy seashores also have a lot of life, but most of it stays hidden under the sand. So it's a little more difficult to explore unless you have the tools to do it. So my virtual walk is going to take you from the sandy seashore to the rocky seashore. And this is a very condensed tour. So there's a lot that I had to leave out from this, unfortunately. But let's start. This is a creature, if you've been to Bombay seashores, you've probably seen this on the sand. They are like little clumps of material, of clumps of debris stuck together, and you can see these in the thousands on the seashore, in the part that's exposed by the low tide. This is actually a kind of worm called a decorator worm. It's called decorator for that very reason, because it uses bits of solid objects and sticks it to its tube. It lives in a tube, which is made of a parchment kind of substance. And this is done not just for protection, but also so that tiny creatures start using this these solid materials, this mix of solid materials as a sort of reef. I'm sure most of you are into diving and or you know about marine life at least. And you probably know that coral reefs house a lot of animals. So this works as a sort of a micro coral reef where tiny animals come and live within these solid bits, and the worm then feeds on them. So that's how the decorator worm works. And a place like Bombay with a lot of debris, needless to say, you find bits of plastic also sticking to the tube. Like on this one, you can see this little bit of yellow plastic on the one at the back. This is another creature that you can often see on sandy shores. Not often, sorry. It's actually seasonal. This lives far out in the open sea, floats on the open ocean. But periodically, when there are winds blowing to shore, especially in the monsoon or just before the monsoon, you find these washing ashore. This is the porpita or blue dollar, related to jellyfish and about the size of a 1 rupee coin. And on certain days, if you're really lucky, and if these guys are extra unlucky, I would say, you'll find many of them. You'll find them in the thousands on the beaches sometimes, with the whole water line littered with little blue dots. Moving to the rocky shores, pretty much any rocky shore in Mumbai, you will see one patch of the shore, one belt along the shore covered in these. These are rock oysters, and you might be familiar with these. They are eaten, and for fishing communities that live along the coast in Mumbai and most of India, of course, these are an important edible resource, and they are handpicked at low tide. So I also use this photo to show that it's not just animals. There's also a very strong people element to the intertidal zone as well. Next, we have these. These are sponges, very simple animals, and very often overlooked as well because of how simple they are. You can find them in pretty much any ecosystem, including underwater coral reefs. But in the intertidal, they are sort of more prominent because they form a very important physical part of the ecosystem. This photo is from Marine Drive, where we have this one patch of sponges that it's very diverse, very colorful, and it houses a lot of animals within the, like in the gaps between the sponges, inside the sponge, the holes in the sponge. So it sort of forms an ecosystem on its own. We have a lot of different sea anemones, very diverse, many different species, all across the intertidal in a range of sizes. I've chosen to show you this particular one, which is not very common. It's very tiny. It's less than about half a centimeter across, very colorful. This is one that we haven't been able to identify yet, and just goes to show how unexplored this intertidal region is. This is everyone's favorite. If you've been diving, you've definitely seen this. Even if not, you may have seen it on a seashore. It's quite a common organism. It's called a zoanthid. This one is Zoanthus sansebaricus. It's also commonly called a soft coral, although it's more closely related to sea anemones. It's like a colonial version of a sea anemone. And that bright green color comes from photosynthetic organisms that live within these polyps, and they manufacture their own food in sunlight, and the zoanthid gets a very large percentage of its own nutrition from this, and in return it houses the organism. And zoanthids grow in these vast mats in certain places, which again form a sort of an ecosystem like those sponges do. There are creatures that live within the zoanthid, on the zoanthid. Some creatures feed on the zoanthid. This is a relative of the sea star. Again, something many of you might have seen. It's called a brittle star. These live under those typical loose rocks you saw on the typical rocky shore that I showed you in the previous slide. And these come out mainly at night. So shore walks at night are rewarding in a completely different way. You see a whole different set of organisms that come out at that time. Brittle stars scientifically are called ophiuroids, and ophios in Greek means snake. So that's a reference to those snake-like arms, which also helps these animals move really fast, unlike their starfish cousins, which crawl very slowly. This is a video. A lot of you might be having a tough time figuring out what that was. These are actually, and so did we actually, it took a long time for us to figure out as well. These are bits of, this is water squirted out by a kind of clam that lives in the mud on this particular shore. This is at Juhu Beach. And these clams live under the ground or under rocks. And they have this one fleshy tube called a siphon, which sticks out above the ground. And they use a water current inside their bodies to feed. And they also excrete their substances into this water, and then they squirt it out. And there are so many of clams in this patch that they all squirt that out in unison, and it looks like that. So we were quite mesmerized by this. We kept visiting this patch, and ultimately we found out that we're actually being peed upon by hundreds of clams. Everyone's favorite marine organism, corals. There are several species of corals found in Mumbai, 4 of which I've shown you here. Corals are, I mean, you're all familiar with them, but a lot of people are not familiar with the fact that they are found even in a place like Mumbai. And they're found, like some species or the other is found on pretty much every shore across Mumbai's entire western side, which has rocky seashores. And these are Schedule 1 animals, which means they have a level of protection equal to the tiger in India. And it was just amazing for us the first time we found that there's so much of this. Octopuses are also found in Mumbai. In fact, quite common in the winter months. And I've actually seen more octopuses in Mumbai than I've seen anywhere else I've tried to find them. And yeah, that's also something that gets people very, very interested in seashores when you see something like this that you've seen in textbooks or documentaries or something. And octopuses also breed in our tide pools. They lay this sort of egg mass that looks like a string with rice grains on it, and also that size. Nudibranchs are another favorite for anyone who's interested in marine life. And this particular species is Cratana, which is very common and very abundant across Mumbai. And very colorful, obviously. So it's a great hook to getting interested in the intertidal zone. And this sea slug here is sitting on a branch of a hydroid colony. You can see a polyp here at the top left. Hydroids are similar to sea anemones, and they have these stinging cells on their tentacles. The sea slug eats these stinging cells without discharging them and channels them to the tips of these orange appendages that it has. And then it can use those stinging cells against its own enemies. So it sort of steals its prey's weapon and then eats the prey. Here's another nudibranch, and this became quite an iconic one. It's called Goniobranchus bombayanus. It's named after Bombay. This was first found in 1946 by a British explorer at that time. And it wasn't reported from Mumbai ever since for a long, long time until we happened to find it a couple of years ago. Now, does this mean this is some sort of rediscovery, or is it a rare sea slug? I can't answer that for sure, but I think more than that, it highlights the fact that these shores are barely explored at all. Maybe this was around for a long time and no one checked at all. We have many different kinds of sea snails. This is a cowrie, and you've probably seen it on the edges of dresses or on keychains or on someone's shelf. But these actually belong here. Again, a common organism in the intertidal. And cowries, the interesting thing is they were used as money in the past. In the ancient times in India, they were used as currency. Now they no longer are, and we see quite a lot of them on the intertidal. But not everything on the intertidal is perfectly harmless. This is a cone snail. It's a predatory snail. How could something as slow as a snail be a predator? How could it hunt? So what this snail does is, you see the fleshy siphon at the front that functions as a sort of a gun, and it has barbs that it can shoot out through that like a harpoon, which is connected to a venom gland. And the venom is potent enough to immobilize something like a fish in a matter of seconds, a couple of seconds. So that's how something as slow as a snail can catch something as fast as a fish. And cone snails may use that in defense as well. They don't always do, but they can. So if you see a cone snail, don't pick it up. Or as a thumb rule, just don't touch anything that you're unfamiliar with on the seashore. Moray eels are also a common thing seasonally. This is a high-fin moray eel, one of the 3 moray eel species that we found on our seashore. High-fin morays are also fished by hand by the locals who live on the coast of Bombay. And it's sort of a luxury food, and they're fished by hand only mainly around the peak winter months when they become really abundant. You can find them in pretty much any tide pool. This curious thing, it looks like sabudana. It's also the size of sabudana, very tiny. This is an egg mass of a squid, and what you can see inside there are the squid babies developing inside the egg. You can see their eyes, and you can see those tiny brown dots. Those later develop into the color changing cells of the squid. And that big paddle like thing, like a spoon in front of their faces, that over time will split down the middle and it will become tentacles and arms. So this is an early stage of squid. They'll ultimately grow up to become this, the Indian Ocean squid. These don't spend a lot of time in the intertidal. They come here just to breed, and they die right after they lay their eggs. But when they grow up, they go into the deep sea, and the Indian Ocean squid is a really huge species in the marine, huge in the sense, in the scale of the role they play in the ecosystem. They are an important fishery resource as well. But besides that, they also form the basis of like the main diet of a lot of different animals. One of them being oceanic dolphins. A lot of oceanic dolphins feed almost exclusively on squid. So that's how many squid there are, and that's how many squid there need to be in the ocean ecosystem. And this is to show that a lot of those oceanic organisms use the intertidal to breed, even though they may not live there. As we come close to the end of the shore walk, on the upper part of the shore, we see this. This is a kind of fish called a blenny, and these often hop out onto the rocks and they sit there. And well-meaning nature lovers like us, we tend to flick them in back into the water. That must actually be pissing off the blenny a little, because recent research has found that these blennies intentionally spend a lot of time out of the water. One of the reasons is to escape predators in the water. And there's one study that has also shown that they may be, suggested, not shown, that they may be in the process of starting to use land more in that evolutionary process, like mudskippers are. So that's a very, very interesting thing. And blennies are also, they show a lot of interesting behavior. You can sit and watch them for hours in a tide pool. So we come to the end of this really short virtual shore walk. Of course, this is just a trailer. And we end the walk with a customary butta by the seashore. So now that we have all of this biodiversity, what did we do about it? we started taking shore walks, like Sejal told you in her part of the presentation. And we started documenting a lot of this because there were barely any records available publicly of all of this life. So we took to this platform called iNaturalist, where we have this project now called Marine Life of Mumbai. And it has gathered people over time, gathered contributors. Until now, we have 377 species just from Mumbai seashores, and counting. We keep finding new stuff all the time. And some of our team members over time moved to different places. I myself moved to Goa for a job for a couple of years. Other people moved to Chennai, people moved to the Andamans for further studies, and everyone started tide pooling in all these places. So then we had to set up a sort of larger umbrella project called Intertidal Biodiversity of India. And you can see from those statistics on the left-hand side that this project has collected a huge amount of data now. So from what started as just a few blips on the map where there was any significant data available, we've now got to this where we have, you can see pretty much along the shore it's scattered, but there's some sort of representation from most regions of India now, the intertidal zone. And we want to keep building this up. And visiting the seashore it's an extremely easy thing. So even you can do that. You can get on this platform called iNaturalist. All you have to do is basically take a picture and upload it. That's all it takes. You don't need to identify it. Experts can do that for you. But all of this goes into a huge data set, which is very, very essential. It's used for science by people all over the world. It gives you a place to log all your findings. And not just that, but like the coastal road example which Sejal gave, there was an impact assessment done for that project, which did not cover the much of the biodiversity that we find here. Didn't account for that at all. And at that time, it was this kind of open, free citizen data that helped to plug that gap quite effectively, I should say. So with everyone starting to develop an interest in the intertidal, and it really has boomed in the past 3 years. I wouldn't say boomed, it's still at a young stage, but the interest that's been growing in it has been quite steady. So I would say definitely that mankind's next step will be our greatest, and it will be in the intertidal. So you can contact us at these places. We have an Instagram handle, Facebook handle, and Twitter handle for Marine Life of Mumbai. On iNaturalist, we have these 3 projects, Mumbai, Goa, and India. And we are happy to have more people add to this or establish their own regional projects under these if required. Yeah.
Also, we are very happy for volunteers to come on board. So we're always looking for people to help us out with whatever it is that skill sets they have. So come.
Yes. We'd be happy to take questions or suggestions or any kind of discussion.
Somebody's saying more.
Thanks so much, Doc Crickets and Sejal. This is amazing. I mean, just I love tide pools. I used to when I was in Lakshadweep from 2017 to 2019. My office was right. I mean, literally 10 yards from the intertidal zone, and in fact, it was part of the intertidal zone, really, not exactly this thing. And every time I needed a break, I would just get out of office, sit by the tide pool, and just sit and observe. I've got so many images. I really didn't know about this iNaturalist thing, but I've got so many images which I'm going to share with maybe Abhishek or to upload and stuff like that.
I think
but
you should just upload share them, upload it.
But it's an amazing what should I say, ecosystem.
No, it's really, I think it's also really helpful for the as you know, Abhishek said, like if you put it on iNaturalist, I'm not somebody who actively uses iNaturalist as much as they do, but every time we have like a collection of photos, we put it up because as Abhishek had once told me that if you're putting anything up on iNat, I think you're kind of contributing to science somewhere. like kahin na kahin something will come up and your observations might be useful to somebody. And I think that is actually Garima just messaged me and said that she's just made a account on iNaturalist. So excellent. Thank you so much. Super.
Okay, so question number 1 was from, I think, Sanjay, and he wants to know what the crab was in the video. I think that was a skeleton shrimp, if I'm not wrong. Or Sanjay, can you retype which video you're talking about?
Was that the audio that you couldn't hear?
I think it was
exactly that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was a sea fan, and those are skeleton shrimps, which are actually not shrimps. We've just done a post on a post on that. There are amphipods which are not they're not skeleton shrimps, but they're called so because of the
like hundreds of things in the sea. They have a misnomer.
Yeah. So they're not they're part of the same this thing, but they're not shrimps.
Thank you.
okay. Next question is from Anoop. Anoop J Cat, as most of you all know him from Instagram. Amazing, brilliant, award-winning photographer. He says, "This is brilliant. How are you shooting this?"
Firstly, Anup, that's like, I don't know what to say. Really thrilled that you find this brilliant. But these are really simple photos. At least the ones in my presentation were all taken with just a normal macro lens and a DSLR from above the water.
The ones in mine were actually by phone with a macro lens. So I usually shoot with my phone. I don't use my DSLR, but I have a macro clip on.
Anoop, anything you want to add to this? Or
Anoop should come and shoot with us.
No, man, this is brilliant. I was like, wow, the whole time.
Please come and shoot with us.
I'm gonna come to Bombay and shoot for sure.
Yes, once COVID is done, please come and we will go and look at.
Do you all have a contact in Mangalore? Because I'm in Mangalore for the next how many months.
I think
I'd love to go do some.
Yeah, I just look through. We do have people who contribute to the Intertidal biodiversity of India. We have people who contribute from Mangalore. So
if you can put me across, I'd love that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Just so everyone knows, they also put out the shore walk and the most of the programs that are run by Marine Life of Mumbai are put out on Facebook and Instagram. So follow them for updates and stuff like that, because it's not very often that you might hear about these unless you're on one of these groups. So plug for Marine Life of Mumbai, Sikh Cucumber, and Sejal, please, this thing. And of course, Scuba Evolution India will always be sharing stuff. So please follow these channels to know more. There's another interesting question from. Sorry.
I was just going to add, while we've been in lockdown, Sejal has done 3 very nice virtual shore walks, which are on the Instagram and Facebook handles. And the contributions for those virtual walks come from all our community members.
Yeah.
So I think you would really enjoy that until we can resume actual shore walks.
Yeah, it's been actually, so that's another, thanks Abhishek, that's actually really good. So that's another real surprise we had. So we did 2 shores which we used some of our team photos, and we thought, okay, let's just do this and see how it goes. And then people started to send their own photos from shore walks, even if there were photos that they didn't think were great, but we started incorporating them in our walks. And the last one we did was Bandstand, no? Bandra, I think, or Haji Ali, which was almost entirely done from community photos. Like people who had come with us and sent us photos, and it was just quite brilliant to see how people are using lockdown also as a way to do SciComm. Fun.
That's really nice. So we have one more question from the Indian Divers Association, and I think this is a really interesting question. How has the intertidal zone changed with expanded development into the coasts of Mumbai, and what are your observations? So I guess it would be over the last 3-4 years since you have set up that this observation would.
How much time you got?
You have all the time as long as you're willing to see it.
That's gonna
I have
take,
no problem.
that's gonna take a while.
Yeah, well, to say it in just a few words, it's not really looking bright. But we are, like for example, right now there's the coastal road coming up, and there's this whole thing with that about it went back and forth with the courts. The High Court had stopped it, then the Supreme Court overruled the High Court. So all of that drama happened. The work has been going on through the lockdown, and a lot of the patches, I think, including Sejal, the one where you had taken that octopus photo, right, at the
Yes,
intersection.
Worli is now like
that shore no longer exists now.
I mean, it's barricaded, and Haji Ali has been transformed beyond recognition as well. At least this side of Haji Ali, which you can see that beautiful iconic site from the road.
Yeah. So since we started, we have seen very drastic changes, mainly happening because of the coastal road. I mean, changes keep happening. There's Bombay, and development keeps pushing further and further into the sea. But the coastal road project is the one that has made the most drastic difference we've seen. But also that said, I haven't been in Mumbai personally for the past couple of years. So I think Shaunak is on this.
No, he's not.
Oh, he's go. Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, I was thinking he would have been able to give you a better perspective. But in short, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question in enough detail.
But
you said you have quite some time, so you're probably expecting a much more detailed answer.
No, but also to add to that is the coastal road is one of those things. Of course, there are other parts of the city which are now have threats, like the flamingo, the place in where the flamingos come, and that entire bridge and all of that is being constructed. And there is enough evidence to say that things are changing there as well. What is very interesting is in Juhu, and this is something that is just an observation. So we don't have, I have not read much on that, but in Juhu, if you see, there's a sandy part of the shore, and then there's a rocky part of the shore, and then there's a jetty that has been built, which is fairly recent in terms of how long the beach has been around. So in that sense, where the jetty is now, because the water currents and all of that change, of course, when you construct anything, that part of the beach has become slightly different. So a lot of waste also collects there. It's become like a muddy ecosystem in a way. It's weird because, and you can find fiddlers there, and you find mud skippers there, and things that you, may not have expected to sort of see. So yes, of course, definitely anything that is constructed is changing the course of things. This one is really big, the coastal road. So one waits and watches, I think, to see what that will do. It is quite terrifying.
Right. This is something which I always see because I generally drop into Bombay every 6 months or so. So there is a lot of visible change on the coastline, and I've been dropping into Bombay every 6 months or a year since I was a child. So it's something which I've really seen as a difference. So Commander Skandan Warrior says, thank you, Sejal and Abhishek, an excellent insight. And then Parimal says, where exactly can we find the patches of intertidal corals in Mumbai? And related to this is a question by Sanjay again, is can we have the name of the 4 Schedule 1 corals shown in one of the slides? He says, I know one false pillow coral is Schedule 1.
Yeah. Where exactly can you find the patches, right? They're quite scattered. Yeah, there are many patches of them. Most, like I said, all the seashores on the western seaboard that we've explored have had these patches in different sizes. Marine Drive is one place where we have a huge flat rock that gets exposed when the tide goes out. If you've driven by Marine Drive, you may have seen those 4 concrete slabs in the sea. They stick out even at high tide. It stands out. So that is a patch. It's called Char Ladi because it has these 4 slabs. That patch gets exposed on very low tides, a couple of times a year maybe. That place is full of corals. It has lots and lots of different corals, lots of different sea fans, sea whips, a lot of that stuff.
Bandra also has, Bandstand has corals
Yeah,
coral
other
patches
than that, pretty much all other shores have corals in smaller patches.
in smaller.
Where you
Bajeli.
find them is, yeah, where
My
you
gosh.
find them is usually in still waters where, the water is really calm and there's a big shallow tide pool. That's usually where you find them. Occasionally you find them on the underside of rocks, but where you find them exactly it's a bit of a tough question to answer because they're scattered, like I said.
Come to the shore. We'll
Yeah.
take you.
Abhishek, I just one point on that. Most of the corals are need a substrate, right? So they'll be mostly on the rocky part of the shore, right?
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
whether
always on the rocks. Yeah.
tetrapods are on Marine Drive, things like that. So it would be.
I haven't seen them on the tetrapod personally.
Not at the
Only on
we
the,
have not seen
yeah.
them, but inside.
I haven't seen them on concrete. I've seen them on the natural rocks on the shore. To answer Sanjay's question, I think I'll just type they have some really long names, so I'll type them rather than say them. I might pronounce
You
them
can send
wrong.
them across to me, or we can figure it out. Or but best just type it in the group chat.
Yeah.
It'd be nice.
Yeah.
So I'm going to skip this question from Indian Divers Association because it's a follow-up of the question which was there earlier, and we'll come back
But
to
actually,
that.
I do have an answer to that as well. I mean,
Oh,
I don't
great.
know. Again,
Go
it's a very, I mean, in terms of biodiversity, yes, of course, there will be changes. And this is something that we also discuss a lot because the thing is, there's very little available data right now. In the sense, there is literature on this, but we don't know too much about what has already been here. So it's a bit difficult to say for sure how things will change. Instinctively and through research in other places, I think we know that it will change. At least with the current, I mean, jahan pe there is, like for example, Worli and all of those things, there's reclamation has already started. So there's literally concrete being dumped on places. So those things, of course, will die. But I mean, it's not speculation. It is literally happening. Whether or not things will survive and how they will adapt and what will happen is remains to be seen, and that's something that we also talk about quite a bit because there is so little to actually go on by now. We don't have that much information yet. I mean, we've had very little time to actually look in the way that we have been looking. So I think that will tell us a little more only in time.
Right, and then Snigdha has a question. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Snigdha. How is that despite having proof of having Schedule 1 species, the area is not protected? What's the argument for that?
Snigdha, do you mean to ask why it's not a protected area, like why it's not an MPA? Can you just clarify that?
Yeah. If we know exactly where they are, and that we know there have been scheduled species found in some area, should it not be protected by law? I don't know about this, so that's the question.
It doesn't necessarily have to be an entire protected area because it's a Schedule 1 species, but construction on that area is forbidden. Like you're forbidden from actually constructing over a Schedule 1, like over a coral colony. So what has happened is the High Court in Bombay was convinced with that argument when it was presented with that, and it had ordered a stay on the project until they could think of a remedy to or some sort of either like relocation or whatever
Mitigation measures.
Yeah, some sort of mitigation measures, because the court did take account of the fact that a Schedule 1 species is going to be affected, and that is not legal. But then the Supreme Court allowed the project to continue with the work that it had already started, citing the fact that they would incur heavy losses if they didn't finish what they had started. And so that back and forth kept happening, and
it's still happening.
Yeah,
like in
it's
the
still
sense there are
happening.
now fresh petitions filed for the lockdown also. So even that is an
Yeah.
ongoing.
Snigdha, does that answer your question? Can we go to the next question, or you need further clarification? Just unmute yourself.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Question from Siddharth, who has now become a very regular on our webinar, which is very nice. How are corals in intertidal zones different from corals which you generally find in the sea, which are permanently underwater?
I must say I'm not completely familiar with the corals from deeper reefs, because my expertise in that area is very, very limited. But I don't think any of the corals we find here in the intertidal are strictly restricted to the intertidal. You do find them deeper as well. Which corals you would find in the intertidal would be the ones that can take more stress, because the intertidal is a zone that keeps getting exposed. So they should be able to withstand a little bit of exposure to the air, periodic spikes in temperature, periodic spikes in salinity. So the more tolerant corals are generally found in the intertidal. And also we find the ones that are, you know, small colonies that can encrust or something like that. Not not a huge structure that branches or like forms a plate, something that will get damaged possibly in an intertidal zone. You don't find those. You find these small encrusting forms a lot more.
Right, so that brings the next question, which is from Snigdha again. It says, do cyclones and the monsoon and flooding also affect the coral health? Which is part of the question which you probably answered earlier, but I think you would like clarification on that.
So yeah, there are certain physical events that can definitely break a coral because of the physical stress, like a strong wave, or sometimes boulders get toppled over in the intertidal when the surge is very strong. So that can definitely damage them. In terms of bleaching, we have noticed bleaching happening every year since we started observing. And pretty much, I don't think we've seen any. I don't think we've seen any that don't get bleached in the summer. But they all recover to their apparently to their peak colors. I don't know about health because we haven't measured the health. But visually, the colors are completely recovered by the start of winter or so. So that bleaching and recovery keeps happening. And considering that these are hardy species, I'm guessing they are used to that. But a lot of this is guesswork, and we have very little. We started just 3 years ago, so that's too little data to go by.
Great. So we have, I just noticed on the on our attendees list, we have Vardhan Patankar as well. Dr. Vardhan, welcome. Yes. And would you like to share anything with us on this? Because I'm hoping you'll join us for another webinar on something that you would like to talk to us about. But anything today on any of the questions, any of your experience, you could share something with us.
Yeah, thanks, and thanks for sending and organizing this event. And thanks Sejal and Abhishek, wonderful presentation. So I think they are the best, and they've covered everything. I just want to add that yes, as Abhishek said, that these are very sturdy species and they are able to tolerate a lot of stress, and yet they are surviving, which is something remarkable and something that we should cherish, that in our waters or in Mumbai, that we get this sturdy species that are able to survive all kinds of pollution, stress, and all kinds of literally shit that goes in the water. And if we are not able to protect even these species, which are highly resilient, then it's really sad. And if the development projects are overriding that, and if these tiny corals, if they're going, it's really sad. And I'm very happy that what Abhishek and group and Shaunak and everyone is putting together, and what kind of work they've put together. And because of them, we know so much now about Mumbai corals, which is great.
Vardhan, you might be able to add about the comparison between intertidal and deeper corals also. There was one question previously. Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah.
What you said is true, that even in terms of deeper coral, I was not clear whether the question was whether deeper coral along west coast of India or general deeper coral. I was not clear with that. So what's the question about general deeper coral?
If I could just take this, read the question. Basically, the question is how are the corals in the intertidal zones different from corals which you generally find in the sea, which are permanently underwater? So it's not an east or west coast thing. It's just about corals which have shifting waters and you have more permanently underwater coral.
Oh, okay. So I guess it's one thing to note is that what we find in Mumbai and in fact all along the west coast, they are patch corals and they're not really reefs. And what you get in deeper water mostly, especially in oceanic islands such as Lakshadweep, Andamans, and as well as Angria Bank, what you find is reef, the continuous stretch of reef. The species are very different. Their composition is very different. Their structure is very different. But there are few species which are very common across these sites, and such as these few favets, they are common. But those species, because they also grow in different depth, they are used to surviving in, or they are adapted to survive in those depth conditions. So these corals which are in intertidal, they are because of kind of stress that they are exposed to, they are very different. I guess I answered that question.
Right. I think that's perfect.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, over to Abhishek.
Abhishek, thank you so much, Vardhan, for coming on and for answering some questions of ours. Parimal has a question that how do you locate corals in deep sea? Is it remote sensing?
Oh, that's again uh, beyond my expertise.
Vardhan's must be still around.
Yeah, so if I could take that question, I would say that with remote sensing, it is possible because it all depends on what kind of spectral resolution your corals have. And usually in shallow waters, it is possible to use remote sensing techniques, but otherwise in shallow waters to map shallow water corals, and when waters are clear, then it's possible. Otherwise, it's very difficult, especially in along the west coast where there is seas are very highly turbid. It is very difficult to use remote sensing technique to map the corals.
Thanks. From what I know about survey and hydrological survey from my background, is that either you have a boat survey, which is for coasts and for reefs, you will do a remote sensing, which would probably be a green laser aircraft remote sensing scan. And then to get a better picture, you have to do a physical survey, which would include taking a small boat using side scan sonar and to actually map the reef, so to say, or the substrate or whatever the bottom is. And that would then generate a kind of picture which you would interpret and maybe then actually take a physical sample to see whether it is actually coral, whether it is shale, whether it is broken coral and sand. And that's how the underwater charts are made. So in the deep sea again, it's more or less just, it's not for hydrological survey, it's not really corals that you look at. You're looking at what the bottom is and what type of bottom it is more than the coral. So in that sense, I think once you know that there is a reef, you would generally feel that there is some kind of maybe soft coral or fan coral or something on it, or maybe table based upon that, right? And I think what I've read now is that there is a lot of coral beyond the photic zone being found as well. So there would be some kind of deep dives which you would probably need to do and locate deeper coral in India. I have seen plate coral all the way down to 55, 60 meters in Lakshadweep. I haven't dived anywhere else at that deep, but yep. Abhishek, you want to take this? Can you suggest some marine biology book to start learning from the basics?
I'm going to jump to my absolute favorite book, which is Marine Life in India by Dr. B.F. Chapgar. That is hands down the best book that you can start with for Indian marine life. Beyond that, if you're looking for technical things, then there are a bunch of books with about marine biology, survey methodology, and things like that. But if you're looking to learn about marine life in the sense about the creatures, and you don't want to get too technical. You want something that's fun to read. This book by Dr. Chapgar. It's called Marine Life in India. I don't know how common that book is now. It keeps coming and going from out of
Yeah,
publication.
it's not
Yeah.
always in stock. There's also another book by him only. If there is also you want to start with it, like even the intertidal stuff, because I'm not a like I also wanted a basic one. Um, so I also read Seashore Life of India. So that is very intertidal centric as well, and it's very lyrical and it's extremely easy to understand. And I think it's excellent science communication. So that's definitely something. Chapgar's books, Aankh Band Karke, you should take. And even Seashore, right?
Right. If there are any more questions, we can take them, maybe one or two questions, because I'm sure everybody else has dinner to get to. So can we have any questions? Last couple of questions, and then we'll go ahead and end this. And thank you everybody for joining us for now, before we end this, of course. Right, any questions? Doesn't seem like. If anybody has a question that they don't want to type in and they want to speak out, you can, just unmute yourself and go ahead. But thanks so much, and thank you, Sejal. Thank you, Abhishek.
Thank you,
And
Vishnu.
thank you,
guys.
everybody who's here.
Thank
Thanks,
you very much.
everybody who's here. I don't want to, point out anybody specific, but specifically, Sejal and Abhishek for making this happen. And
thank you so much, Vishnu.
I hope we can do something more again after maybe a couple of weeks, just to keep maybe another show walk or something like that.
Yeah, that would be great.
Right.
Sorry, can I just jump back to one question
Yes,
that we didn't cover? It's not a question, it's actually a comment from Indian Divers Association saying, considering the CRZ rules have been proposed to be amended, more of the intertidal zone would be at risk going forward. So that's a comment actually. And that's absolutely true, but I just wanted to add that while it does look kind of grim, the future, but we are also quite pleased with the fact that people are starting to take notice of it. Like things were happening in the intertidal zone and hardly anyone was noticing all these years. Now there's like people are realizing that there's something happening here and that there is an ecosystem here, and a lot of that is hard to stop actually, but we're glad that the basic awareness has happened now, and it's starting to grow across India, different regions of India as well. Just
Because
wanted
it's
to add that.
not just the threat from construction and stuff like that, it's also plastic and tar balls and oil and all of that. So I think problems are kafi hai. But he's right in the sense that at least even if the awareness is slowly building, there's also documentation that's happening. So there's also stuff going in the media. So journalists are literally coming to the shore and talking about tar balls every year, plastic every year, sewage kahan ja raha hai. So I think that itself also is, the communication is also quite it's moving in a strong manner.
Right, we have a last question. Abhishek, you want to take that? Any steps in place towards the ecosystem restoration? I was just going to say, those of you who are here are actually the choir, and we are really preaching to the choir. But everybody who has any pictures, please join iNaturalist, add up stuff that you can, and that's going to make a difference to the ecosystem. And every time you pick up plastic, there is going to be ecosystem restoration. Carry a bag which you can whenever you go on the tide walks, which I'm sure Sejal and Abhishek advocate as well. And make sure that anytime you're outside of the sea, pick up stuff. And even otherwise, of course, in this environment you don't want to pick up anything because of COVID, but I'm saying once things get better, I'm sure you can be you should take a step and be involved in ecosystem restoration, and rather than wait for anybody else to do it. And I think there's something wrong with the system, with my system that's going on. Anyway, I'm going to stop the recording now, and thank you so much, Sejal and Abhishek, again. Thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you, guys.
A real shout out to all of you all doing a great job at Marine Life of Mumbai. And we look forward to working with you all even more. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
And everybody,
Thank
thank you.
Everyone.
Everyone.
Yeah, thanks a lot for coming. Thank you, Vish.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.